Okay. Hi, everybody. Great, camera moved. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Laura Sponzeric. I'm the Advocacy Manager here with Downtown on the Go. We are the advocate and resource for all things transportation in Tacoma. We're really excited to be able to offer these forums in a hybrid format this year. It's really nice to have some folks in the room with us, and we still really appreciate everyone who's turning in on Zoom. For those of you who are on Zoom, there is an automated closed captioning available. If you click the CC button on the bottom of your screen, that will turn on captions. So for our 2023 forum series, we're inviting Tacomans to imagine what the future of Tacoma could be as we dive into the rising community concerns of housing, traffic violence, and climate resilience. Today, we're discussing the rising epidemic of traffic violence. Since 2017, traffic deaths have doubled in Pierce County. So today we'll discuss what's being done to stop it and what this troubling trend means for people's mobility in Tacoma and Pierce County. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the forum. So for folks in the room with us, you may have received a piece of paper and a pen as you came in. If not, we'll have more at this table with me. You can write down your questions, turn them into me, and then I'll get them to Tanisha. If you're on Zoom, you can put a question into the Q&A at any time. I want to give a really big thank you to Metro Parks Tacoma and Pierce Transit for making this hybrid format possible. And we're really thankful because this space is just perfect for us. So really works out great. And thank you to our 2023 series sponsor, Parametrics, for helping us to put on these conversations. Now, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to introduce you all to our moderator, Tanisha Jumper. Tanisha has been our moderator for quite a few years now, and I think she's really what brings these forums together. So we're so excited to have her with us again this year. She is the Chief Communications Officer for Tacoma Public Schools. And Tanisha, go ahead.
Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us again today. These conversations are always really impactful, and it never feels like we have enough time. So I'm going to try to minimize how much I talk right now. But I just want you to know we've got a great panel here today of avid bike riders, advocates, safe schools, safe routes to schools, and all the things that we're going to talk about today. And this conversation is really important because as Tacoma grows and changes, the use of our roads, how we've traditionally used them and how we'll need to use them in the future is really a conversation that we need to be having. And so with no further ado, I will say for those that don't know me, when I started doing this, I was the strategic manager for 2025 at the City of Tacoma. So I know it's like insider stuff about some of this, and I was the communications director before I left to come to Tacoma Public Schools. So also worked on Vision Zero. So there's a lot of nuance to these conversations and a lot of feedback that we've received over the last couple of years related to this that will probably come up in these conversations. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves and what their relationship to Vision Zero, and maybe even I'll ask Carrie to go first so she can tell you a little bit about what Vision Zero is. So
good question. My name is Carrie Wilhelme, and I am a transportation planner with the City of Tacoma and the Public Works Department. And my most obvious and clear connection and why I was invited here is I was the program manager, or the project lead for the creation of the Tacoma's Vision Zero action plan. And I'm now working on the implementation for Vision Zero. My other connection, though, is that I live and I work and I raise family and I have family in Tacoma. And I have friends, and we walk, we bike, and we drive. And the goal of Vision Zero is to eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries for all users. So drivers, people who walk, people who bike. And with that in mind, that's my connection. And I'm trying to make my city safe for everyone in Tacoma.
Great, thank you. Noah?
Yeah, hello, I'm Noah Struthers. I'm executive director and a co-founder of Second Cycle Community Bike Project. And I run an organization that advocates for cyclists in Tacoma. And I believe in Vision Zero. And I was part of the process of implementing Vision Zero for Pierce County. I was a part of a group of advocates to implement Vision Zero at the Pierce County level this last summer. And kind of why I am here is because I've been advocating and I'm for bicycles and pedestrian transportation around our cities. And if people don't feel safe doing that, they're not gonna walk, they're not gonna bike. So my skin in the game is just like making sure that people feel safe when they're walking and biking in Tacoma, because they're just not going to do it if they don't feel safe. And that's why I'm here and talking about Vision Zero today.
Thank you. And Dr. Chen.
Hi, I'm Anthony Chen. I'm Director of Health of the Tacoma-Pierce County Health Department. You know, like Carrie and Noah, I have personal connection. I live in downtown Tacoma. I walk, I bike, I take the bus. You know, I've known people who've been hit. I've been hit personally by cars, been almost run over by cars when I'm walking. But I mean, I've been hit on my bike when I've been biking. But then from a public health standpoint, obviously the impact, you know, on our community and the health of our community, whether it's the physical health, the number of car crashes, the people who are injured, both physically and mentally, right, emotionally from trauma of car crash, as well as the deaths, significant impact in our community, especially for some of our youngest and oldest residents, you know, the most vulnerable.
Yeah, thank you. So let's just jump into the first question. And for this one, I'm going to start with you, Noah, because I know you do a lot of, you have your own experience. Noah and I have known each other for a while, and Noah rides his bike farther than I drive my car. So he does a lot of bike riding, and he also does a lot of training of young kids on bicycle safety and riding their bikes. So what's your experience as a bicyclist or pedestrian in Tacoma-Pierce County?
Well, I've been a bicycle and a pedestrian in Tacoma since I was a kid. You know, I grew up out in unincorporated Pierce County out towards like Olalla, you know, just about on the border. And I've been in Tacoma working in bike shops and riding my bike for over 20 years. So I have a lot of road miles. I've commuted from Tacoma to Sumner when I was working warehouse jobs, you know, commuted at 11 o'clock at night to get swing shifts, you know, so I've ridden from Tacoma to Sumner. I've ridden all over Tacoma and Pierce County to get around for basic transportation needs. I was carless for about 10 years. Yeah, so that's my kind of experience. And I have a lot of experience talking with customers and students and people wanting to get into biking and people that do bike everywhere for their main source of transportation. So I kind of have a close connection to what people are experiencing on the roads, because they bring me their stories and they talk to me about it.
Yeah. Dr. Chen, I know you're an avid rider as well. I see you grocery shopping on your bike, which is very impressive to me. So you want to tell us about your experience as a bicyclist and a pedestrian in Tacoma?
Well, here's a great example, because my favorite produce store is down at 99th and Pacific, right? But I live right downtown. And I'm fortunate because when I bike there, I can go on Park, right, which is a designated bike road. I don't have to worry about getting run over. Sometimes I'll go on, you know, McKinley. It's a little sketchier, but definitely not on Portland or Pacific, right? So I have options of how to get there. But one time I was coming out of the store, loaded up my bike, and this guy comes out of the store in a wheelchair. He's clenching in his teeth a black garbage bag and trying to cross Pacific in his wheelchair. And, you know, it was a little too far to go down that light or that light. So I offered to help him, and I picked up his bag, and he had, I think it was a 25-pound bag of dog food, and he had some other stuff like stashed under his bike. And I helped him cross the street, but he had no choices, right? I mean, and a lot of people don't have choices. And I was fortunate, I had choices of how to get there safe, or safer, I should say, right? But I mean, that's just, you know, when you get out of your car and you walk and you bike, you see things like that, and you recognize, and the people who are just flying by don't realize the challenges that those who walk and bike and roll have.
Yeah, thanks for that. Carrie?
So personally, and I'll try to differentiate when I'm talking professionally versus personally, personally, I've had a lot of positive experiences walking and biking in Tacoma. So I do try to bike commute. Or if it's within a, short distance, like under 5 miles, I guess. So I'm that bike commuter. I try to ride my bike and I walk a lot. I bike or walk my child to school when possible. So I'm out there doing it and I'm always happy when I do. It's one of those things that like, this feels good. You can smell smells from your community, whatever someone's cooking. I always, it creates that stronger connection that you usually wave to somebody as you're doing it. That's not to say I haven't had near misses though, right? As I'm out. But I've been fortunate that the drivers were going slow enough or they were paying attention enough that something didn't happen. I have not been hit. I've been lucky. I recognize professionally on that lens. And when I'm out too, I see things and I'm like, this is not safe. I'm fortunate right now that something's not happening to me. We need to do better. So I'm very aware as I'm walking and biking at the built environment and how at this particular time, I'm in a good spot that drivers are paying attention, that people are doing the speed limit, that everybody's abiding by the law, but that one thing could change and this environment isn't protecting me in that situation. And so that experience, sometimes it's hard. I love working for the city I live in, but you have to learn to turn that off sometimes, or you can almost like drive yourself crazy of just noticing all these things that need to be done. And it can feel overwhelming sometimes at the work that we need to do. But overall, I love walking and biking in Tacoma.
Yeah. I think it's funny when you do work for the city for a while. I was not in the planning department, was not in the public works department, but you start to notice like, oh, there's no ramp here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the curb cut's too high. Like you just, because you hear these conversations, you sit through enough study sessions, you start to notice. And then when you go to other cities and you walk, and some cities are super walkable and it feels very safe. And there's others that, they never thought of a person on feet. They only thought of cars. And the feeling that those environments give you, just that little shift is noticeable. And it's noticeable in Tacoma, just from neighborhood to neighborhood. Some neighborhoods are very people-centric and some are very car-centric. And you can feel it just walking down the street, which one you're in. So, Carrie, you did a little bit, but do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of Vision Zero work happening in Tacoma, why we went down the road and where we're at right now?
So it started in 2020 with Tacoma City Council when they recognized we were having far too many fatalities and serious injuries on Tacoma streets. And they adopted what was the Vision Zero resolution. And when you adopt a Vision Zero resolution, with it is that you need to come up with your action plan. What are you going to do to address this problem? And you do need to set a goal. Now I hear, zero is unattainable, but you need that goal. You need to start setting that downward trend. And so for Tacoma, our goal is 0 traffic fatalities or serious injuries by 2035. That's our goal. In this last year, we completed what is called our Vision Zero action plan, and we had a Vision Zero task force to help guide that work. Within that action plan, we have actions, makes sense, of what we need to start doing in order to make it so our streets are safer for everyone. That action plan also includes a map. That analysis was done based on crash data, land use, speeds, demographics, like the number of people there, that show which streets are at, we call high-risk corridors. Those corridors that we really need to start focusing our investment on, because those are the corridors that more people are dying on, or because of the way the road is built in that environment, there's a good chance that somebody could be seriously harmed or killed on those streets. Now what we're doing, now that we have that plan and that we have those corridors identified, and no surprise, I guess, to people who live in Tacoma, the far majority of those corridors are located in South and East Tacoma. We're starting, it's like the work, and it's a lot of work, I have to say. And that at times I have hope and at times I'm overwhelmed, but looking at how we can change those systems. So where was it broken to get to the point that we are today, and how can we change it? Tacoma City Council did give us funds in this last biennium budget to start doing this work. A small portion, or a portion of those funds are going to what is going to be called quick build. What are some of the things we can do in the next year or two that hopefully will help make something safer? The first thing we're doing right now is we partnered with the McKinley Neighborhood Plan in that area to help slow driver speeds and create a more safe pedestrian environment in their neighborhood business district. And we're doing what's called a quick build, where we're putting in temporary infrastructure. There's a very wide intersection at Division and McKinley. And we're going to try to narrow it with like temporary materials and also partnering with the arts community to put art in there as a way, a quick build way that we can roll out in a year to try to change driver behavior. We also know, though, given that map, that there's areas that are going to take time and money. And we've started looking at right now Portland Avenue. Portland Avenue has a very high number of fatalities and serious injuries. If you drive on Portland Avenue, they're going fast. And so it's going to take more. It's going to take working with the community and figuring out how we can redesign that street in order to really make it safer for all modes. So we're starting that work, right? But that's going to take time. And then the other thing we're starting to do is we're looking at our design standards. So when a private developer comes in, an engineer comes in, we're doing projects, there's a manual that we're supposed to follow of this is how we design streets in Tacoma. Well, there's places in there that manual is obviously not working for the safety of all. And we have to figure out what it is so that if I'm not here as the Vision Zero person, it doesn't matter. This street change is embedded within the city of Tacoma. And so how wide should our streets be? How wide should the lanes be, right? Because the wider the street, the faster the car, the less safe crossings, the faster they can get momentum and, get those speeds up higher. So we have to start working on that because ultimately the goal is we have to bring those driver speeds down. We all know that drivers speed too much in Tacoma. So we have to start doing the work to bring those driver speeds down in a way so maybe they don't even realize that they're having to slow down. Like that's kind of the trick of working with the built environment is to kind of control that driver in a way that they don't realize that they need to slow down. 6th Avenue Business District is actually a really good example of how this works. When you go in that 6th Avenue Business District, there's a lot going on. And so people just slow down because nobody wants to hit somebody with their car. That's not what people are going out to do. And so because there's so many crossings, there's so much activity, there's always people out there, people just slow down. And so we have to figure out how we can do that kind of design in our streets in other areas to get people to slow down. So that's the work that is just starting now. So there's a lot we're doing, but we're just starting.
Pretty complicated puzzle to put all those things together. So we know most people in Tacoma have to go outside of Tacoma for goods, services, housing, whatever. And so Noah, I know you worked really hard on getting Vision Zero to pass at the Pierce County level. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that process and what you did there?
Yeah, so this last July, there was the tragedy that happened. There was a death of Michael Weiler. He was killed on a crosswalk at 133rd and SR7. And it kind of sprung a lot of us into action and advocacy. And that's when I started getting involved along with Walk and Roll Pierce County and a whole lot of other advocates to do something, but that death was really the impetus for like the actions that happened with Vision Zero. I see. We organized a ride of silence for Michael Weiler, and there was a group of us that organized and county council members. Ryan Mello really put forth a pressure to put up Vision Zero. And there was a group of us that met with Bruce Danmier and they implemented a Vision Zero program. And it was easy because I think it was easier because so many cities have implemented Vision Zero programs across the country for so long. So it was something that they could do. They wanted to do something, it's one step the first step in a long journey to like getting there, but it's like, it's something that politicians can say we're doing, And it's up for us citizens and advocates to continue to keep pressure so that that Vision Zero and things are actually done after people are like, we're doing Vision Zero, you know? So that's kind of how it came about. There's a tragedy, there's a reaction by politicians, and they want to do something. And Vision Zero gets implemented, and we start to move forward to try and do the small steps of what's next, you know?
So, and this is I'm going off script, so I apologize, but how does that, like, what does that mean for a community? Like, I'm thinking about, I live in Steilacoom, and so to get from Steilacoom to University Place, you take Chambers Creek Road, and there's lots of bike riders on there, but there is no bike lane, and it's a windy road. And for people who have lived in Steilacoom their whole life, like me, it used to be like the one space you could go fast, right? And so it kind of whips around, and there's just like this little narrow space between the road and the water. And I think train tracks on once you get a little bit further up. And so what does implementing it successfully look like in those types of places? And I know me and you have had conversations offline about, you know, deterrence and stuff like that. But
Well, I think there's like infrastructure, and then there's like cultural changes that need to happen, and people just need to yield for pedestrians and bicyclists and give people more room on the road and obey the 3-foot law. And a lot of people just aren't even aware that you need to give bicyclists 3 feet and pass, you know? And there's just this feeling that like bikes aren't supposed to be there on the road, you know? And people don't respect bikes on the road. And they're annoyed, they're pissed off. They're like, oh, I got to stop, you know, I got to go around this person, I got to slow down.
right.
But when somebody's convenience is held over somebody's safety, you know, that's when dangerous things happens. You know, I don't know what that looks like. I think that like protected bike lanes are important, but also a shift in the culture and the drivers, and decentralizing the drivers as the only legitimate road users is like a big shift that needs to happen as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Dr. Chen, how does traffic violence connect to public health? What are the impacts what are the impacts that you think that go unreported?
Well, I think, you know, our vision for the health department is healthy people and healthy communities, right? And that's in so many ways. And when we think about health, it's, you know, the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And we want people to walk, we want them to bike and roller skate and skateboard because it's good for their health, right? For their physical health. But we also want them to do that because they're building community. And my belief also is that when people speed, part of that's because they're detached from the environment. And if you're in your neighborhood, or you know the people who are walking, or the kids who are going to school, you're going to slow down, right? So that's one thing. But, you know, frankly, one of the other things we look at in public health is years of potential life loss. That means before 75, if you were to die, how many years of productive life would you have lost? So a kid who's walking to school and gets hit by a car and either disabled for the rest of their life or dies, that's a lot of years. They could have been the next president, they could have been the next CEO, whatever, right? But they're gone, right? So there's that. But then I mentioned earlier, emotional impact. Just as people are scared to go out because of crime, there are people scared to go out because of traffic. Okay, so there are just so many things. And of course, there are other related things, right? Like climate change. You know, the more people are driving, the faster they're driving, the more it's going to impact. And then there's going to be oil dripping off their cars. It's going to pollute our streams. There are lots of I mean, we could go on forever about the health impacts, right? But public health covers all of that, right? And exhaust, right? I mean, we know that that's very correlated with like asthma, and who gets more asthma? Poor people and people of color who happen to be where a lot of these roads run by those neighborhoods or where the factories get built. So there are many aspects of this which impact the public's health.
A few years ago, we had a panelist on who was in a wheelchair, and she talked about how far she would have to go out of her way, like where the bus stop would drop her off. She'd have to go almost 3 blocks down to for a safe cross, or she'd have to take her chance and try to get off the curb and cross. I think she's on 56, I think is around where she was at, to get to her apartment building. And I think about, if you have to make those types of decisions, like it's raining outside, because it's usually raining outside, or like today it's very cold. And not only do you have to get across to your stop, you actually have to go 3 blocks out of your way to get back to your stop. The choices that you might make, and as we've talked about in a lot of other forums, that you either have money or time. And, sometimes you can pay for convenience, but sometimes you can't afford to pay for convenience. So all you have is time, which then ends up costing you money as well, because if you're late for work or whatever, those are all costs. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I mean, I also think about, and you mentioned older people, like for an older person to have to walk 3 blocks out of their way. My aunt has MS and lives off 6th Ave down south part of it, but like 3 blocks is enough for her to be like, I'm not doing that,
Well, you're absolutely right, Tanisha. I mean, autonomy and self-efficacy are really important for our well-being, right? I mean, you're talking about elderly and disabled people. I mean, my dad's 97, and it's like when his social activity gets restricted, like during COVID, I mean, his mental health doesn't do well, and then he doesn't do well physically, right? But he doesn't have any severe disabilities. But imagine the people who are disabled,
right,
or are not as able as we are, them just not being afraid to go out, or just physically not being able to go out. I mean, what's that do for their health? What's that do for their emotional health and their social connections?
Yeah. Carrie, is there a lot of talk? I know the city had passed a resolution about being, a senior friendly, a senior friendly community, and like, what's the conversations around them and how Vision Zero interfaces with some of their needs as well?
When we created Vision Zero, we tried to prioritize the voices of our vulnerable users, one being elderly. So we did partner with an elderly walking group on the east side, did an event with them, walked their route, heard from them on what obstacles they face. And you reach a point where either you have to or you choose to, where you don't feel safe driving. So this particular group, they do not drive. They only get in everywhere walking and taking the bus. On the Vision Zero task force, we made sure that we had people who had access or functional needs, who had a disability, because that's the ultimate goal. We have to build our city to make it that everybody can get around, regardless of ability, regardless of age, right? I mean, little, I get that. But, children should be able to walk to school. That's the thing. So in every decision we do moving forward, and it has been for a while, especially when it comes to our disability community, when we design projects, we look, how can we improve this for people with a disability? Like, that's just, I'll say that is very much ingrained in the city. And that's why at a minimum, you're seeing we're putting in a lot more curb ramps. Like, that's just a priority. We know as city staff that we can't go in and do a project and not put in a curb ramp. Like, it's a no-go for us. Mm-hmm. So there's little things like that we're doing, but every project we do now, can we fill in the missing link sidewalk? Can we make it so the signal is now accessible for people who are deaf or blind? It's these little things that we're doing in all of our projects that are helping making a city that's for everyone.
Nice.
We're getting there.
Well, I think it's interesting because so New York is kind of a crazy place. Manhattan's kind of a crazy place to drive. To me, I would never drive in that city. I would always either like public transportation or walk. But I remember being in New York and seeing little kids riding their bike. And I think it's because there is a culture that like the people are going to be there and there's sidewalks and I don't see that here. I don't see little kids. And I remember when we were doing this sub area plan for South Tacoma, one of the public comments was a little boy who said, I want to ride my bike, but there's cars parked on both sides of the street. And so I have to ride in the middle of the street. And I get yelled at every time I ride in the middle of the street by my mom. So I don't ride my bike anymore. And I just want to be able to ride my bike. And so, thinking about, just that voice, like, how do we create that safety that I think Noah was talking about, of like, as a parent, if you want to let your kid go ride, you want them to be safe, but you can't be everywhere. I mean, I used to ride my bike for like 6 hours a day and with no adult supervision because, I could just summertime, just go ride. How do we create that kind of safety?
So it's the controversial thing that I will bring up. But one of the things that were,
I like controversy. Go ahead.
within mine is that we did recently reduce the speed limit. So when in part of that Vision Zero, that council resolution, it was to look at how we can have a default speed limit of 20 miles per hour in the streets that you would see a child riding. It was a really hard messaging to try to explain which streets became 20 miles per hour versus which didn't, get impacted by the speed limit reduction. I tried like saying residential or neighborhood, but we all have a different, view of what that is. But essentially the streets that we before were like, oh, this is 25. I just know it's 25. I don't need a sign that it's 25. It was lowered to 20. But in my mind, to help me move forward is I'm like, this is the system that I want to change. I want children to be able to ride their bikes in the streets again, or how it can be that way in other cities where you drive slow. And I want that future for Tacoma. And this is one step. And we know that we need traffic calming. We know there's other things that it is going to happen. But if we can actually get it, that we all change our mind, that it's not 25, which the creep happens and then it becomes, 26, 27, 28. And instead it's 20 and maybe 21, 22 with the creep happening of the drivers, that we're creating those environments again in neighborhoods where children can ride their bikes to school, because it does exist. It is a possibility. I grew up with that as well, where we would play in the street. This is like that age comment, and be like, car, and you just step to the side and a car, would drive by and then you'd continue on your way. And so that's my hope. And that's the vision I'm trying to do. And it's going to be difficult. I'll say what'll help is if more cities start doing the speed limit reduction. So I already heard from Federal Way and they're like, hey, we're going to kind of watch how this works for Tacoma and we might think about it. I'm meeting with Bellevue. They're like, I think we're going to do it. So the more that it becomes just part of Washington, even, the more hopefully likely we'll get it lower. And then we go to our advocates and our educators to help us out. Do you want to add anything, Noah, to creating that kid-friendly city?
Yeah.
I think like having designated areas and having non-through streets, is important too. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add actually to the creating kid-friendly, but reducing the speed limit can go a long way as long as people obey it.
Yeah. So,
and I think that's going to be a big culture shift. It's going to be a challenging road ahead.
So what are the policies, infrastructure improvements or changes you'd like to see implemented in Tacoma and Pierce County that you think would be the most effective, or the ones we should get to first?
Having roads taking a narrower roads and like road diet, like I think would be a long ways. Reduce speed limits, bike pedestrian corridors, actual implementation of our master mobility plans that Tacoma has implemented. We have people in planning departments. We have people in advocating for these bike ped infrastructure. It just needs to be like prioritized and the money behind it. I've talked to Liz Castor, who's the head of the master mobility plan at City of Tacoma, and they need more political will and more money to actually implement these things. So I think that more pedestrian infrastructure, more protected bike lanes, reduced speed limits will all go a long ways to like making our city streets and our county streets a lot more safe.
Yeah. Dr. Chen, what are some of the things you would like to see?
Noah hit a lot of the more obvious ones, and in public health, we like to look at the systems, right? When you think about what are the causes for the increase in crashes, right? So one thing, if you haven't thought about this way, is housing. We talk so much about housing, but the more expensive housing is, the longer people are commuting. They're more tired when they're commuting. So if we can get people to live in more urban areas and create affordable housing, people aren't driving that far. Right. So another thing, if you look at the size of cars now, I mean, a pickup truck is taller than me these days. Right. I mean, we know heavier cars and things going faster cause more injury and death. So why are we doing this? Is it because of the marketing? Is it because of toxic masculinity or whatever? We need to address that, right? Yeah. Can you imagine? You look at the cars in Europe and Japan, they're much smaller. Right. It's a cultural difference. So how about we tackle that cultural issue? We also know that there are more distractions, people using phones, whatever, right? So how do we do that? We also know that substance use and alcohol use have gone up during the pandemic. Let's not ignore the fact that you turn on TV, and especially during Super Bowl, there are all these ads about beer and rum and whiskey, right? We have to address our substance use issues. And now with the significant use of marijuana and us not fully understanding, but driving buzzed, we need to address that. It's not just cool to be able to smoke pot, but it impairs you. So these are cultural issues which are not historically seen as traffic issues, but from a public health standpoint, we've got to tackle them because they all add up as part of this. Oh, one other thing too, I think, if you guys have been driving, road rage is up, right? Aggressive driving is up. So what's this relate to? Well, I mean, it's trauma and stress and all that, but it also reflects lack of self-regulation. So, everything the schools have been telling us about social emotional learning, how to regulate yourself, right? We need to catch up all those teens and adults who don't have it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need to fund the schools so they can do more social emotional learning, right? And how do we develop curricular interventions so that this becomes normal for us to talk about how we call people out versus how we call them in, how we deal with other people, even if we don't agree with them, right? So I know those are really big cultural and societal issues, but they have to be part of what we do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fun. The other day, me and my son went to the movie theater, and it was like this two huge trucks, like we parked between these two huge trucks. And my son was like, why does somebody need to drive that big of a truck to the movie theater? And I said, I don't know, but my friend Noah would hate it. And we laughed about it. And I almost sent Noah a picture of it because we were just like buried between these two big trucks. But Carrie, do you have any other policies and infrastructure before we jump into questions from our audience?
I mean, I'm trying to think because there's so much actually. I will start feeling success when people can see the changes happening on the street. When we hear from people, or even I'm out walking or biking and and I can tell, I'm like, oh, we fixed that intersection. There's we made that, turn radius long, more, we tightened that up. So drivers have to slow down and they can't just whip through quickly and not see the pedestrian and hit them. When we are starting to feel, especially in areas that we had speed reduction or doing it, oh, it does. I can tell that the drivers are going, slowing down a little bit. And then we're at the very beginning of a program. And so as a staff perspective, when I can tell it's starting to get embedded in other staff. And it's just kind of what we do, that when we are designing projects that we pause, we're like, how is this going to lower driver speeds? Did we really actually address pedestrian safety? And I don't necessarily have to be in the room, which it is there. We're getting there, but just that's when it becomes just part of what the city of Tacoma is. It's our identity. Then we know we're getting there.
Yeah.
And it's getting there. We're getting
there. All right. I'm going to jump into questions. So how do we balance multiple modes of transportation while making pedestrian improvements? And understanding that vehicles are an important mode. And I think what I'll add to this question is we really are in an interesting point in history where I remember, when I turned 16, I was like, we are going today. I need a driver's license. I need a car, and my kids are kind of like, I'm not really that into it. I've got nieces and nephews who have never gotten driver's license and they're totally okay using public transportation. And then you've got my mom who I think if we took her car away, there would be a major incident. Right. And so how do you create roads? And I don't know who wants to kind of address this question first. How do you make a space that accommodates all of that?
I think it's a false dichotomy, right? I mean, I remember the city manager UP telling me about Mildred. They road dieted it, right? And of course, his city council members are like, how can you do that to Mildred? What about the throughput? And he measured it and showed that it didn't change. Why? Because when you had a higher speed limit and you didn't have the engineering, people do the slinky thing. Light turns red, boom, they gas it. And then of course, the lights aren't synchronized for that speed. So then all of a sudden they all pile up.
Mm-hmm.
And then they wait 3 minutes for the light to change, then boom, off they go. And when they lowered the speed limit and narrowed it, people drove at a steady speed limit. And so they actually moved through faster, right? And you'll see this on the highway, right? You're going to Seattle, and there's going to be slow down at this bend.
Right.
Everyone's going 80 miles, 70 miles an hour. And sure enough, all the red lights come on and you're driving 60 and you just go right by them in the slow lane, right? So it's a falsehood that when you do this, you will slow down throughput and prevent people from getting where they are. So you can engineer it, right? I mean, Carrie, you know more about this than I do.
Yeah. And, I think if you want to drive your car, promote bikes and buses, because that's just less people on the road. So you can keep driving your car. Promote bus rapid transit, if you want every person that's riding their bike or walking, that means there's just less people on the road and the easier it is for you to drive your car. If you actually want to sustain and keep car culture, promoting bikes and pedestrians and buses is important, because we can't just keep scaling up car culture. We don't have the physical space. There's not enough, there just won't be enough parking lots,
Yeah. Okay. Next question. In Seattle Times today, the Vision Zero article says that traffic deaths since the 2015 implementation have not budged. It discusses the cumbersome project by project approach to safety improvements. How can Tacoma learn from Seattle and find a way to see improvements in traffic fatalities for pedestrians and cyclists?
I will try to take that. I haven't read that Seattle Times article, but I did see that the city of Seattle just did I think it's top down. I don't know what the phrasing was, but they really looked at their Vision Zero program and they just released the report the other day, and I haven't had an opportunity to really read their lessons learned. And so it's hard for me to report too much on what they're finding.
Mm-hmm.
I guess before I read that report, I don't know much, but it's hard because on the flip side, Seattle has done so much to make their city more accessible. So it is that challenge of they've increased safe crossings, they've put in protected bike lanes, they've lowered the speed limit. They also have a different environment than us. They have a very restricted environment they're looking at. There's a lot of activity. They're a big population. And so they're having this interesting challenge of growth. How do you go from a city that was built for cars and now is incredibly dense? You have a lot of people walking. You have a really high biking, population. And I think there's a lot of conflicts happening of people still needing to drive in there. So they're at a different stage of just as a city than Tacoma. That doesn't mean that we can't learn from them, but we're just not at that stage of that absolute density that when you have that. One of the good and bad of Vision Zero is that it is a transparent program, right? You have to put your data out there. You need to make it easily accessible. You need to track your progress. I think every city is having this struggle, but it's the Vision Zero cities that really get targeted because they're they're being incredibly transparent with it. And so that is kind of the struggle. You can go to the City of Tacoma's Vision Zero website. We have a data dashboard. We're going to try to update it. We're going to track it. And I'm sure, we will be hearing similar things. So I hope Tacoma continues, or Seattle continues their work, because they're making an accessible city, right? But how do we also make it so we eliminate those crashes?
Yeah.
I think you also have to be really careful. I haven't seen this report either, but it'll be the same as saying, hey, Tacoma Public Schools is not doing a good job because test scores are lower now than compared to 2019. Guess what happened in between?
Right.
We had to send kids home, because of the pandemic. We know that mental health issues are up, right? So, and like in Seattle, there's been so much change in who's living in the city, who's commuting to the city. It's very difficult. I mean, without knowing what they're actually measuring. And also public health, we know that the easiest thing to measure are things like dead bodies, because we can actually see them and we can count them. We cannot measure things like whether an elderly person feels safe to cross the road, right? And, we may be doing all these things and people are now saying, hey, I am going to let my kid bike to their friend's house.
Right.
But we can't measure that.
Right.
Okay, so let's make sure that before we ding the program, we say what else has been going on? What are we really measuring? And sometimes it's the process measures that,
Right.
I mean, we know that if we do certain things, people will walk more. Therefore, if we are doing that and more, we have done that on more intersections, on more sidewalks, whatever, we know that more people are getting out, and that's success. Now, we might not see a difference in the dead bodies, right? But or maybe they'll go up because there are more people driving buzzed or drunk. But that doesn't matter as much as, the rest of that iceberg, right?
Right.
This part might not change, but the iceberg below the water may be melting.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's one of those really important things about any of these types of programs where you're trying to change culture. There is going to be this point in which people are starting to adopt the culture. So there's more people out, there's more people. And this is coming down, but there's this gray area, right? Like that's why, one of my favorite teachings in Ohio where, figures a lie and liars figure. I mean, numbers, if you don't look at them in their totality, they could tell you a story that's different than what's actually happening. And sometimes there are these little periods of time where the numbers are kind of showing you something different than what's actually happening, because the cultural change that's happening it's kind of like they're missing each other, right? And you kind of have to stick with these things, especially prevention. So it's one of those things. Prevention is always one of the hardest things to track. And this is now my social service background coming out. Got paid for a lot of years to prevent kids from getting pregnant. And people would be like, how do you know you're successful? Well, they're not pregnant, but I can't prove to you that they would have got pregnant if I wasn't here. I just know that because my program's here, they're not getting pregnant. And that's the goal, right? But sometimes when prevention programs, like I tell people all the time, like you might not want to pay for a shelter, you might not want to pay for these services, but trust me, you will know if that program goes away. If you think it's bad now, don't fund that program and watch what happens when it's no longer here. And so I think we have to not let perfect be the enemy of good and progress. So we got lots of questions and a little bit of time. Okay. How will the port expansion impact pedestrian safety with more big roads in Fife and Puyallup and more big trucks? That's a big question.
That is a big question. The city of Tacoma works very closely with the port, and I will say even on the Transportation Commission, we have our co-chair works in the port and is an avid biker. It will be a challenge, but it's not an impossible challenge. Again, we just have to identify the streets that freight is being used, but also design those streets knowing there are other users. And I know that sounds like a really simple end because I don't have a specific answer right now, but the port is an important employer of the city of Tacoma, of this area, and we can find a way to work together. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a few, actually, Noah, it was you. I remember when we interviewed you as part of the Vision Zero Action Plan, you made a comment about how you have quite a few people who come in for services that they work in the port, but they take a bike there, because that's their form of transportation. And how making it so that the port area, the Tide Flats area is also bikeable
Yeah.
is just an important from the standpoint of even getting employees down there.
Mhm.
And that's just one of those bigger challenges we'll have to take on, but it's not an impossible challenge. It's just when a street design comes through, we know freight's on it. We probably just have to have extra precautions, make sure those bike lanes are protected bike lanes,
Mhm.
make sure those crossings are very clear, obvious crossings. And we can make it so they mix together, or maybe the bike facility is one street off and not necessarily on the street that the freight's
Mhm.
taking. But then we have to make sure that that bike facility one street off, like Park Avenue is a safe route for them to take and people know about it.
I think it was 2-3 years ago, Fife actually got a PSRC award because they redid, like near the Emerald Queen Casino, they redid that street as a complete street. They put in big side, right? So just because we have worrisome things happening doesn't mean that we're not improving other ways, right?
Right.
And if you've driven out 99, Pacific Highway now, they've got 2 big roundabouts, right? And I
Mhm.
believe that's where 167 is going to come in somewhere. And it's actually
Well, they also have a planned protected bike lane,
Mhm.
167. When they're expanding 167, there's a planned bike lane to connect from Tacoma to Puyallup. So there are plans to,
So
they're
in
putting a lot of money actually.
in
into
fact, it may be
that
more
trail.
safe then
It might
than
be
it
more
is
safe.
before, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's happening in Lakewood too. I grew up there my whole life. Grabbly Lake Drive never had sidewalks. Now they have sidewalks, roundabouts. You can basically walk from one part of Lakewood almost all the way to the Lakewood Town Center and be on a sidewalk. And that was not my childhood. You were walking in the middle of Veterans Drive or Military Road. So
I used to commute by bike from downtown Tacoma or like Stadium District to Sumner, and I would ride through the Port of Tacoma at like 11, 12 at night. I would be coming back. I'd go in there in the afternoons or work swing shift. But riding in the Port of Tacoma is actually not that bad. And like there's often a lot of traffic. And I don't, it wasn't the scariest part. Like River Road, is like super scary, but riding down, 11th Street into the Port of Tacoma and out past St. Paul and then like cutting through wasn't as bad. But once you get to Portland Avenue, or Puyallup Avenue, it's a different story, but
you're right, because at one time when I first started this job, I lived in my parents in Federal Way, and I'll come through 5 Heights and you ride down 11th, which is where the UPS facility is now. And if you've ever driven there and you go over 25, you're going to get a ticket, right? Because they ticket heavily on that road. So it's a very safe road to ride. That stretch till you hit Alexander's on the other end, and you have to move over to.
that leads us to this next question. Ideally, all the communities in Tacoma would have an equal experience with investment in infrastructure and road safety. But of course, that's not the reality in Tacoma, with East Side and South Tacoma being more impacted. In light of that, how do we suggest ensuring that investment benefits the specific community members that live there and that we don't, accidentally price people out of the area?
well, it's in Vision Zero program and prioritizing Puyallup Avenue and South Tacoma and East Side
Yes.
for pedestrian infrastructure improvements.
Yes.
So I think that's one way to answer the question, is that there's priorities in that area because there's hotspots of collisions and hotspots of fatalities in those areas. But it's just like SR7 Pacific Avenue was built in the 50s and 40s, and it's all parking centric and car centric areas, so it's just like it's going to be a different experience just changing that infrastructure in that area where there's just so many parking spaces in front of stores, and as opposed to like in the Stadium District, and there's just less parking and there's less highway, and it was built when they had trolleys. It's just going to look different and it's going to feel different. So there's just going to be some disparities and different treatments of the areas, they were just built at different times in the development of the Tacoma area. And anything past like 1940 is car-centric design. So it's more challenging to adapt and change.
I, of course, agree with all that. I hear what the question's asking though, is how do you bring investment to an area, usually bike lanes and safer pedestrian crossings, and not gentrify or an area essentially. Yeah. Great questions that I don't have the answer to, because that's such a hard one. You don't want to not invest in an area and make it safer
Right.
and more accessible under that fear.
Right.
So I don't let myself go there, I guess, because I know too many people, or I hear from too many people who can't, like Dr. Chen, you said, that are scared to leave their house. They don't have sidewalks. They want to walk to a park, but they can't access the park. And so they have to drive, even though it's just a few blocks away. And that we should not withhold investment. But how do you find that balance is, I'm not entirely sure of, then the rising property values that come from a safer neighborhood and more access and better walk scores. That is a challenge.
Yeah. Dr. Chen.
Well, there's several things. One is I see we have a city council member in the audience, but I know council member Hushka is chair of our board, and she talks about using the equity index to guide decision making, right? So is the city using the equity index to guide their decision making around infrastructure improvements? But another thing too is former Mayor Pete Lewis of Auburn. I remember being in a meeting with him once, so it must have been 10, 12 years ago, and he said, my biggest weapon was a can of paint. So downtown Auburn, like many other downtowns, used to have a lot of car and peds accidents. They restriped it. He didn't quite have the money yet to put all the bulb outs and whatever. He just restriped it, painted a bike lane. That is a road diet, right? It's visually narrowing the road, right? And you can paint sidewalks, right? I mean, crosswalks, I'm sorry. So the concept there is, another thing too, right? The back end car parking, angle back. You don't necessarily have to build more parking. It's like you're just restriping the parking lines. Instead of this way or this way, they're going to be this way. And we know that's safer, especially for elderly and handicapped and kids, right? Because the doors shield the kids from the oncoming traffic. So there are some low cost things you can, I shouldn't say low because I don't know the actual cost of these, but they're lower costs. They're not, it's a philosophical commitment to say, we're going to do this. We're just going to make small shifts until we have the money to fully road diet it. Why can't we change to how the parking lots spots are? How can we just narrow the road, paint the shoulder line closer in so that we can create a bike lane? And make sure that we've paved that area so it's not that kind of crumbly shoulder. It's a real bikeable shoulder.
Yeah. And I think the reality is that it is a little bit of when we build it, they will come. There's a shift that will happen when we start to make certain changes. And I think we did see that during the pandemic, and we saw where people took all the parking spaces in a community and made them into restaurants outside because we needed more space. And somehow those restaurants were still full. People figured out how to get down there without having a parking spot right at the front door, right? So I think there is some shifting that will happen. We are almost at the end of our time, so I'm going to ask you guys one last question. If there's one thing you could tell this audience, both online and in the crowd, that they could do, or that would be helpful to making Vision Zero go a little bit further, what would be the one thing you'd ask them to do?
All right, well, I'll start because Vision Zero is not about individuals. I want to say that. So we know it's a system change, but I'm assuming most people in the audience drive a car. And it's funny, my friends give me a hard time where they're like, oh, Carrie, thanks a lot. Now I am super conscious of school zones and I used to speed and now I feel intense guilt now if I speed because I know you're going to get mad at me.
Yes.
So if you could pay attention to the speed limit. And then also the one is if you see in a safe way, people wanting to cross the street, please stop and let them cross regardless if it's marked or not. All crosswalks, so yeah, all intersections are crosswalks, but also I recognize some many streets, it's not necessarily safe to have you stop and then every car keeps going. So within reason, but we have driver bias. We have windshield bias. We don't see all those people walking and biking, and there's a lot of them out there. And until you're a walker or biker, you may not see it. So please just slow down and stop for those people who are trying to or have to walk or bike.
Thank you. Noah?
One thing, just one thing.
I mean, if you can talk really fast, you could say more than one.
I, I think I would, if I could just magically put a pedestrian bridge at 133rd Street right now, that would be awesome.
I like it.
That's like just one thing, if I could have a magic wand, but I would like to see 4 more bike ped mass transit advocates put on the Pierce County Transportation Advisory Commission. There's only one on the Pierce County Transportation Advisory Commission, and I'd like to see more so we can make more changes and policies about transportation.
Perfect. Thanks.
Oh, this is a hard one, so I'm going to go for a big one. Okay, so I want every one of you to think about what healthy people and healthy communities look like. Right. And healthy, not just physical health, but mental, social health. And when I say communities, not just where you live, it's everywhere you go. So as you're driving, what's that healthy community that you're driving through? Right. And, people are healthy, they're safe, they can be connecting with their neighbors. Right. And how are we going to get there? Right. So think of, we can't get there until we envision how we're going to get there. So think about it and then use your voice and not only work for it, but talk to your electeds, talk to the businesses and whatever, sell them on that vision and get them to do it too. Does that count as one thing?
That does. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you all for being here today. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Laura.
Okay, I think my microphone's a little louder, so I'm going to let it adjust. That was really great, guys. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation with us. And I know there's a lot of questions that we didn't get to both in the room and on Zoom. I think we touched on some of the topics that were included in those unanswered questions. So we try our best, but we only have so much time. So thank you so much for those really great questions. And I have to say always thank you so much to Tanisha for being such a phenomenal moderator and helping us have these really cool conversations. I want to let you know that we have one more Friday forum this year. It'll be on Friday, March 24th. We'll be digging into the intersections of community, mobility, and climate resilience. So more of a climate focus on that one. A recording of this forum is going to be available on our social media accounts. It should be up by Monday. If you feel so compelled to share it with folks who couldn't be here today, we welcome you to do so. You can find more information on our website, which is downtownonthego.org. And we have a flyer in the back of the room here with some info on that next forum. So thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you being here, being part of this conversation. We hope we'll see you next month. Thanks.
One